What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Another exciting day here. We got the Passat in the shop. We got to rip this motor out and get it ready for the Tacoma. Let's check this car out. And I want to say, if you guys need any parts, if you're into these Passats, it's an 04, 05. I know a lot of these parts interchange with the non-TDI Passats, but this is a 05, I believe, Passat with the TDI. The tranny is bad. It does nothing. It does not drive at all. You can put it in any gear, and it's like neutral. So tranny's shot, but the rest of the car is in very, very good shape. Honestly, I kind of feel bad taking it apart because it is honestly in very, very good shape. Let's check it out real quick. So here's the motor. This, like I said, is a BHW. Very good shape. There's no, I don't see any oil leaks and no noise. It runs really good. I'll fire it up in a second for you. But check out the rest of the car. This body is almost mint. There's a couple little scratches in it. Interior is super nice, all leather, heated, all the goodies. Got the sunroof. So if you guys need any parts, obviously I'm not going to ship like big stuff like seats or anything, but if you guys are local and need any big parts, feel free to hit me up. I'll have my email address down below, but there it is. So we got to get started ripping this motor out. I've never really messed with these Passats. I know, like a lot of Volkswagens, the whole core support radiator, all the AC stuff slides off the front as one unit, and then we can start pulling the motor. I'm hoping to leave the tranny in, that way I don't have to go underneath and disconnect everything with the tranny, the CV axles and all that. Hopefully I can get to all the bell housing bolts and slide just the motor out, leave the tranny, because I don't care to pull the tranny. Like I said, it's shot anyway, so I do not need the tranny. So what I'm going to start with is get this whole front end off, get access to basically everything on the front of the motor, and then instead of pulling the motor up, a lot of these Volkswagens, you just pull it up a little bit to get it off the mounts and then just slide it right out of the front. So let's get tearing this front end off. I almost forgot, we got to start it up. Let's fire it up and I'll show you how good this thing actually runs. There it is, guys. I haven't started it in probably 6 or 8 months. I've had this car for probably a year sitting out back, but I haven't even started it in like 6 months, and I didn't even cycle the glow plugs. No, it's not cold, but still, did not cycle them. Fired right up. There is one little noise. I think it's one of the tensioners up front, but other than that, it really runs good. I'll show you how sweet this tranny is. There's reverse, drive. It does nothing, so completely shot. But like I said, I don't care about the tranny. This thing has 181,000 miles on it, and kind of funny, if you look up here on the core support, it looks like they replaced the timing belt at 180 and 186.09. So it's got like what, 500 or 1,000 miles on the timing belt. I was planning on replacing it, but I may just keep this one. I'll see once I pull it off. I want to check the brand of the belt and the tensioner and all the pulleys and everything. If it's a name brand like a Gates or a Continental, I might just leave that belt because it's brand new. I did pull this cover off and it does look brand new, but we got to get the motor out. I want to pull it all apart and make sure everything is good to go there. All right, there we go. Front end is off. You can see everything stays connected to the core support. Honestly, kind of a pain to pull, but once you get it off, you have so much access into everything for the motor. So we're just gonna start stripping stuff off, pull the air box, all the intercooler piping, and try to get access to the back of the motor to see if we can get those bell housing bolts off with the tranny still in the car. And then, yeah, pull stuff off till we can yank this motor out. So one thing I like to do when I'm pulling these out for a swap is I like to label all the electrical connections. So when you're pulling it apart, and obviously stuff like the horns and stuff, you don't really need to label. I don't know if this is actually connected to the engine harness on the Passat, but I like to just label them, even if I know what they are, just so when I'm going through the harness and wiring it, I know exactly what it was from and there's no mistakes. So just grab some tape and a permanent marker and just write, you know, MAF sensor here, that's the intake or the CCV heater, N75. So just go around and label all your connectors. Well guys, I started taking all this apart here. You see the fuel filters out. I was trying to get this harness, this alternator and glow plug harness out from behind that bracket. Then I decided to check out the ECU box where the main harness goes in, and there's only one wire you need to disconnect. You got to pull the main, you can see the red one there, a main power wire for this big fuse right here. So you just got to pull that one wire, and all these disconnect, these colored connectors there, those just disconnect, and this whole harness will come out. So we're just going to leave it like that. We'll just pull the whole harness with the engine. So I guess we got a few more plugins on the tranny, and then maybe get this exhaust out of the way so we can get to the bell housing bolts. And I think we're pretty close. There's a few other odds and ends, power steering lines, a couple other things we need to disconnect, and then we should be able to yank the motor out. All right, we got it up in the air. I got the starter out. So the torque converter bolts are right behind the starter. You can see that Torx bolt right there through the opening into the transmission. We got to pull all those torque converter bolts out, and then we got to finish pulling all the bell housing bolts. And I think we're pretty close other than that. Disconnect power steering lines, and maybe a few other little items, but I think for the most part we're good to go. I wasn't able to pull that down pipe. You probably could if you went under and cut it off, but I'm just gonna leave it. I just took it off the turbo, moved it to the side. That gave me enough room to get down in there to get the starter out. I already got a couple of these bell housing bolts, so let's get the torque converter bolts out. I know I'm not filming this. It's very, very hard to see. I'll see if I could probably get an angle right down here, but all these bell housing bolts, you're not gonna be able to see anything while I'm trying to take them out. So sorry, you guys don't get to see the footage of it, but let's get to work and hopefully we can get this thing out here in a couple minutes. All right, we got those bolts off. They were extremely tight. There was 3 of them, those right there. So have a helper stick a breaker bar on the crank and hold that while you're loosening up these bolts here. It's a lot easier that way. That way you can actually keep it in place and get the bolts out. So now we just got to get bell housing and a couple other little things, and we can see if we can get this motor out. The only hard part is gonna be we're gonna have to lift the motor up off of the cross member, stick an extension between the cross member and the oil pan, because there's like 3 or 4 bell housing bolts on the very bottom of the motor, but can't get to them right now because of that cross member. So hopefully we can get the motor high enough and get underneath in between there to get those bolts out. All right, we got the motor lifted up probably about 2 inches, and you can see there's a gap between the bottom of the oil pan and that cross member there. If you look right through there, you can see that bolt there. There's a bolt there, and then there's one in the center. So we need to get a long extension and just go in between the pan and that cross member, take out those 3 bell housing bolts, and we should be able to slide this whole motor and everything just right out the front. There we go. We finally got the motor out. So not too bad. It's a lot harder, I would say, than the ALH to pull, but all in all, not too bad. We got it out. It took about 6 hours. So there's a couple other things I kind of want to pull just in case. Radiator hoses. These formed hoses are always nice to have. These ones are pretty long. They run all the way up to the heater core here. So I'm going to steal those. I might take a couple AC lines in case I decide to do AC. Power steering, I'll probably just do custom hoses, so I'm not going to worry about getting the power steering lines. And then we got to go into the inside on the other side of these plugs here, these colored plugs. They obviously run into the whole dash harness and into the fuse box inside. There is some wiring we need out of there. We need the fuel pedal. I believe the main power relay is in the dash as well. And then I got to figure out what exactly I want to pull for wiring. And then one other thing we got to pull is the lift pump out of the tank, because we're going to use that as well. But I need to get the shop cleaned up. It looked like a bomb went off in here. There's parts and tools everywhere. So I'm going to get that cleaned up. Next few videos, we got to start working on the motor. We got to start working on wiring, figure out what we need to keep. I'm not really familiar with these PDs, so I'm not sure exactly what we need as far as all the sensors and everything. I imagine we'll probably need most of them. I know my ALH is pretty stripped down, but the PDs need a little bit more to run. So I got to do some research, figure out what we need to make this thing run. And then we got to tear into the harness, strip the stuff we don't need. And then all the power basically runs through those colored plugs there. So we got to figure out all the power wires, what needs power. All that stuff is coming very soon for you guys. All right, guys, I did a little research on wiring for this BHW. So out here in the engine bay compartment where the ECU was, there was all these plugs, obviously the two ECU plugs, and all these colored plugs here. So right here, the 219 relay, that is the main power supply, basically the 109 relay of this generation. And then this 80 amp fuse here is for the glow plugs. I believe that 15 amp is for the injectors, and then that 10 amp is for the O2 sensor. So that is very nice. It's all right in this one location. Everything else on this harness, basically, we don't need to touch. We don't need to touch any of these plugins. That's already wired in. The glow plug relay, which is that big box there, that is wired in 100%. So really all we got to do to this harness to make it functional is redo this wire here for the main glow plug relay. That is a battery power, I believe. I'll have to double check. And then there is the fuel pedal wiring that runs through these. There's a few powers. I know that big red one right there on the white plug is a main power, and there's ignition power, I believe, in one of these. I haven't located those yet. I still need to dive farther into what actually runs through this. But other than that, the harness that is on the motor is 100% complete. We don't need to do anything with it unless you decide to delete something. So in that case, you would just take the harness apart, take the wires out. You can unpin them from the harness up here at the ECU, or you can just snip them off, leave them in the harness. Either way, whatever you decide to do, that is up to you. So what we need to do is get some wiring out of the inside of the car. What you're going to need is the OBD connector, which is right here. So we need that and that wiring. There's the fuel pump relay, which I believe is this number 373. I'll have to double check that as well. So we need that relay, and then you need the throttle pedal and the wiring with that. What I have always done in the past is, instead of just snipping those wires and having to rewire the whole system, what I do is I take the dash apart, I pull the fuse panel here with all the wiring to it. I pull all the wiring basically from those colored plugs up underneath all the way down to the fuel pedal. I snip the wires that are going like over to the HVAC and all that. We don't need that. And then there should be a harness that runs from here into the back of the car. You can cut that as well. But I take this whole portion of the harness out of the car just so I have all the wiring intact. All the wiring from the fuel pedal is going to run directly up to these colored plugs. A lot of these power wires are going to run from these fuses here to those colored plugs, and it's a lot easier to identify every wire that you need. So I think that's what I'm going to start with, is getting this dash torn out, enough access in here to be able to pull that harness out. It's just so much nicer to have the whole harness right on the floor in front of you when you're trying to wire it. There we go, we got the interior stripped down. We got what we need for the harness out. So this is basically all we're looking for. We got the fuse box here just in case we need anything out of that. We got both of these relay panels, and that 373 there is the fuel pump relay. So we might be using that. And then all these colored plugs that plug into the engine harness there we got, so we can kind of figure out what these wires are for, along with a wiring diagram. We're gonna need these two here, the throttle, and if you do cruise control, you'll need the brake switch, and you need to wire in a clutch switch as well. And then the last thing you need is this OBD port. But what I like to do, like I said, I like to get this harness. That way I can take this apart. I can take the whole throttle wiring all the way up into these plugs, so I know exactly where it is. Yeah, you can trust a wiring diagram. I feel like it's more reliable to just pull this harness apart, pull the wiring out. It really doesn't take that long. Once you cut all this tape off, you have access to all the wiring, and you know exactly where it goes and what it does. So that is the reason I like to pull this, at least this section of the harness. You don't need anything that goes over here. The harness splits up here and goes over to the HVAC. The harness here goes, I believe, to the rear of the car. I know the fuel pump wiring is in this harness, but we're just going to run new wiring. I'm not going to, strip the entire car down. Another good thing with pulling this wiring harness out, from what I found, is you have all the wire too. If you need to steal some wire, say if you need a big, positive lead, you got one right here. So that makes it very nice. If you need wire, you can even match colors if you need. So that's about all we need, other than we got to pull the rear seat, grab the fuel pump, and we got to pull the actual pedal out for the throttle pedal. And I believe that's really all we'll need out of this car. All right, we got it out. So one thing, make sure you pull your pickup strainer off before you pull the pump out of the housing, or it will snap. So I got to see if I can find a replacement strainer for that. But pump is out. I'm not exactly sure what this is. It's some sort of jet. I forget the name of it. I know I've tried to research it before, and I could not find the function of this. You see it just loops right around to the bottom. It clips into the bottom right here of the whole assembly. So I think what I'm just going to do is tie this up in the new tank in the Tacoma and just leave it as is. And all there is a power and a ground, and then the feed that you'll hook up your feed to here. So pretty simple. Just got to figure out a new strainer, and then once we drop that tank, we should be able to fit this into the pickup assembly on the Tacoma and make it work that way. Well, that's it, guys. We got all the parts we need for the swap. So now we got to go through the motor. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do to it. Like I said, for sure I'm going to delete the balance shaft. I got to look at the cam. Maybe they did the cam with the timing belt. I'm not really sure. I got to dig into it and figure that out and order up some parts. So that's what's coming next. We got to tear into this motor and figure all that out. And then we can bring the truck back in and start swapping this motor in. Well, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.